The bank was busy. Long lines curled around velvet ropes, and the sound of clicking heels echoed off the marble floors. It was the kind of place where everything looked expensive: gold trim on the teller counters, glass walls, cold air conditioning humming softly. In the middle of it all, the manager's voice suddenly cut through the noise like a sharp blade. "Ma'am, empty your pockets. Right now." Heads turned. Conversation stopped. People looked over to see what was going on. The manager, a tall man in a fitted suit, was standing behind his desk, pointing at a black woman sitting calmly across from him. She was dressed simply: faded jeans, clean sneakers, and a dark hoodie pulled slightly back. No jewelry. No designer bag. No smile. The way he looked at her wasn't just rude, it was full of judgment. He didn't see someone who might be a doctor, a business owner, or someone with a plan. He saw a problem. And he wanted everyone to see it too. "You're asking for how much?" He scoffed loudly. 1.8 million? Seriously? She didn't flinch. She didn't even blink. She just looked at him, quiet and steady. Near the corner of the lobby, a teenage girl held her phone up slightly, already recording. She whispered into it, "Y'all, this guy's Wilden. This is going straight to TikTok." Her live stream had 200 viewers and was climbing by the second. The woman didn't move. Her hands stayed in her lap. She looked like she was waiting for a bus, not being publicly accused of trying to scam a bank. But the manager kept going, his voice rising as he pointed to the manila folder she had placed on his desk. "Let me guess. You printed this off the internet, right? You people think you can just walk in here and ask for money like it's some kind of game." From her seat nearby, an older white woman frowned. She had been banking here for years. She clutched her purse a little tighter, unsure of what she was seeing but already feeling that something wasn't right. The room felt heavy. The judgment wasn't quiet, it was loud, clear, and public. And the woman being judged hadn't said more than 2 words. She didn't have to. Not yet. The manager wasn't done. He leaned back in his chair and let out a fake laugh that echoed through the lobby. $1.8 million, he repeated, louder this time, as if he wanted the whole bank to hear. A couple of people looked up from their phones. A man near the ATM stopped typing his PIN. The air shifted, not with panic, but with quiet tension, the kind that spreads when someone in power starts to lose control of the room. The woman still didn't say anything. Her folder sat untouched on the desk. Her hands were folded neatly on her lap. She looked more like someone waiting for a meeting than someone being humiliated in public. "You know what I think?" the manager said, leaning forward. "You probably heard about one of those government programs. Figured you'd walk in here, hand me some printed numbers, and walk out with a check." At that moment, her phone buzzed quietly on the desk. The screen lit up, "Michael Chen, U.S. Treasury." She declined the call without looking. It wasn't the first time her phone had buzzed today, and it wouldn't be the last. The teenage girl near the corner adjusted her phone to get a better angle. Her stream had passed 1,100 viewers. Comments were flying. "What is happening? Asterisk. He's really talking to her like that? Asterisk. Get his name. Someone call the news. Asterisk." Inside the teller booth, Maria, a young woman in her 20s, watched from behind the glass. She knew she shouldn't be staring, but she couldn't help it. Something about the way this woman was handling the situation felt different. Most people would have snapped by now, or cried, or walked out. But not her. Back at the desk, the manager smirked and shook his head. "You people come in here dreaming, but this is a real bank. This isn't a GoFundMe." The words hit hard. A few customers looked down, uncomfortable. Mrs. Patterson, the older woman sitting nearby, slowly closed her checkbook and sat up straighter. Her expression had changed. She didn't say anything yet, but her eyes were locked on the manager. And still, the woman said nothing. Not a word. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't defend herself. She just watched him, with a stillness that said she wasn't worried. She was waiting. More people were watching now. Not just on the live stream, inside the bank too. Customers were no longer pretending to mind their business. Some leaned on the railings. Others paused mid-transaction. The energy in the room had shifted from surprise to disbelief. It wasn't just awkward anymore, it was uncomfortable. But the manager either didn't notice or didn't care. He kept going. He opened the woman's folder with 2 fingers, like it was dirty. "Let's see what kind of fairy tale we've got in here," he muttered. He pulled out a paper, glanced at it for barely 2 seconds, and tossed it back inside. "Yeah, that's what I thought. You've got nothing solid. Just numbers on a page." The teen girl whispered into her phone, he didn't even look. Her viewer count jumped past 2,000. From the entrance, the security guard, David, stepped slightly closer. He wasn't sure why, but something about the woman felt off. Not in a bad way. Just, out of place. Not because she looked suspicious, but because she didn't look scared. Most people in her situation would be upset by now. But she sat there like she had all day. Calm. Straight-backed. No fear in her eyes. Maria, the teller, couldn't take it anymore. She turned to her assistant manager, Kevin, and whispered, "She hasn't done anything. He's just yelling at her." Kevin shook his head without making eye contact. "Don't get involved. Gerald knows what he's doing." But even Kevin didn't sound sure. Mrs. Patterson shifted in her seat. She'd been with this bank for over 40 years. She wasn't one to make a scene, but her hands were shaking just a little as she folded them in her lap. She glanced over at the woman in the hoodie, then at the manager. Something was bothering her. Something about the way he kept saying "you people," like it was a warning and not just a rude comment. The woman's phone buzzed again. This time the screen lit up with the words, "Special Agent Marcus Williams. FBI****. She didn't answer. She didn't even look down. Her attention stayed locked on the manager. And still, not a word from her. Not yet. The manager had worked himself into a rhythm now. He wasn't just trying to deny a loan, he was performing. Loud enough for the whole bank to hear, he stood up, waved the folder in the air, and said, "This is exactly the kind of nonsense we deal with too often. Fake documents, big dreams, no proof." The woman stayed quiet. Her hands hadn't moved. Her calm was starting to make people nervous. Then he said it. "I think we need to get the police involved." There was a pause, like the air itself stopped moving. "I'm not accusing anyone," he continued, with a fake tone of concern. "But we've had people try scams like this before. This needs to be handled properly." The teenager recording whispered, "Oh my God. He's really calling the cops." She wasn't the only one reacting. Mrs. Patterson sat up straight. "Is that really necessary?" she asked the manager. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were sharp. "Can't this be discussed in private?" The manager gave her a tight smile. "With all due respect, ma'am, we have procedures. We have to protect the bank from fraud." The word hit like a slap. Fraud in the middle of the lobby. With dozens of ears listening. From behind the teller counter, Maria looked to Kevin again. "We can't just stand here," she whispered. Kevin didn't reply. His face was pale. The manager picked up the desk phone and began dialing. "Yes, this is Midwest First Bank. We have a woman refusing to leave the premises after being denied a loan. Possible financial fraud situation." "Yes. Black female, early 40s. The live stream exploded. Comments flew in faster than they could be read. "He's really doing this. Asterisk. Get his name. Asterisk. This is racial profiling 101. Asterisk." As the call ended, the manager looked pleased with himself. Police will be here in about 10 minutes, he said loudly. Ma'am, I suggest you leave now before this turns into something more serious. The woman still didn't move. She didn't speak. Her phone buzzed again. Same name. Special Agent Marcus Williams, FBI. This time, she lifted her head slightly, looked the manager dead in the eye, and said just 8 words. Are you sure that's your best option? The manager froze for a second. Just one. Her question wasn't loud, but it cut through everything. The bank fell into silence again. Even the humming air conditioner sounded louder than usual. He looked at her like he wasn't sure he heard correctly. Asterisk best option? Asterisk he repeated, trying to laugh it off, but it didn't come out right. She didn't repeat herself. She didn't explain. She just looked at him, calm, steady, and completely unbothered. That was the moment the energy in the room shifted. People started realizing this wasn't a normal scene. Something else was going on. Something they didn't fully understand yet. The teenage girl's stream was still running, and now the view count had passed 8,000. The comments were going crazy. Wait, who is she? Asterisk. Did you hear what she just said? Asterisk. Something's off. She's not scared at all. Asterisk. Mrs. Patterson slowly stood up from her chair. She wasn't just annoyed anymore, she was angry. I've been banking here for over 40 years, she said, her voice loud enough to be heard. I've never seen someone treated like this. The manager looked around, realizing more eyes were on him than before. Customers were recording. Staff were watching. Even the security guard had taken a step closer. Maria, behind the glass, took a deep breath. She turned to Kevin. If we stay quiet through this, we're part of it. Kevin still said nothing. His jaw was tight, hands gripping the edge of the counter. The woman calmly reached for her folder, unzipped it, and laid a thick stack of documents on the desk, letters, forms, papers most people wouldn't recognize. But she didn't say what they were. The manager rolled his eyes. This doesn't change anything, he muttered, refusing to even look at them. You think just because you printed out some fancy-looking papers you can scare me? Her phone buzzed again. This time, she slowly turned it over and showed him the name glowing on the screen. Special Agent Marcus Williams, FBI. She declined the call. Then quietly, without raising her voice, she said, "You should wait until they arrive." The manager didn't respond. He just stood there, now starting to feel something new crawl up his spine, doubt. The door swung open, and 2 officers stepped inside. Their presence shifted the entire room. Every phone in the lobby turned their way. Officer Martinez, older and calm, scanned the room quickly. Officer Daniels, younger, followed behind, more tense. They headed straight for the manager's desk. The manager stood up taller, trying to act like everything was under control. Yes, right here, he said, pointing at the woman in the hoodie. She came in with questionable documents. Requested a massive loan, refused to leave, and I have reason to believe this is attempted fraud. The officers looked over at the woman. She didn't react. She stood up slowly and gently pushed her folder toward them. Ma'am, Officer Martinez asked, can you tell us what's going on? She opened her wallet without a word and pulled out a slim black badge holder. She flipped it open and placed it on the desk. There was a long silence. Then she spoke. Dr. Aisha Coleman. Federal Reserve. Senior Compliance Officer. Badge number 08427FR. Everything stopped. The manager's mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. Officer Martinez picked up the badge, checked the seal, checked the texture. He nodded slowly, then handed it back. Thank you, ma'am. The teen girl holding her phone let out an audible gasp. She's with the Fed. Her stream hit 14,000 viewers in under a minute. Maria behind the glass clapped a hand over her mouth. Mrs. Patterson leaned forward, completely stunned. The security guard stood at attention, suddenly remembering where he'd seen that kind of composure before, from officers. High-ranking ones. The manager stepped back like the ground had shifted beneath him. "Wait, you're with the government?" She didn't answer that directly. She simply tapped the folder with one finger. "Everything you've said to me, and everything you didn't bother to read, has been recorded. Audio. Video. Witnesses. And now, police officers." The young officer looked around, trying to process it all. Officer Martinez remained steady. "Ma'am, are you here on an official investigation?" "Yes," she replied, still calm. "This branch is being audited for racial discrimination in loan processing. I've been gathering evidence for the last 42 minutes. The manager looked like someone had just pulled the floor out from under him. His hands dropped to his sides. His voice was gone. The quiet in the room wasn't awkward anymore. It was loaded. Heavy with realization. And nobody, not the staff, not the customers, not even the manager, knew what to say next. The silence didn't last long. The manager's phone rang, and when he looked down at the screen, all the color drained from his face. Regional Director, Sandra Blake. He stepped away from the desk, turned his back to the crowd, and answered in a low voice. But everyone could still hear her shouting through the phone, "What is going on at your branch? There's a live stream with 15,000 people watching you call the police on a federal investigator." He tried to respond, but his voice cracked. "Sandra, I didn't know," she didn't say who she was. But Sandra wasn't listening anymore. She was done. The line went dead. He turned around slowly, his face pale and stunned. Dr. Coleman was already stacking her documents neatly. She wasn't angry. She wasn't gloating. She was just doing her job. The officers hadn't moved. Officer Martinez turned to her and said respectfully, "Is there anything you need from us at this time?" She nodded. "Yes. Please notify Special Agent Marcus Williams that the situation is under control, and I'll speak with him when he arrives." At that moment, the bank's front door opened again. A tall man in a dark suit walked in with the confident pace of someone used to being in charge. He scanned the room, spotted Dr. Coleman, and walked straight to her. When he reached the desk, he saluted her. "Dr. Coleman." "Agent Williams, Financial Crimes Division." "Sorry for the delay." Gasps rippled through the lobby. Phones tilted. The string count jumped again, 22,000. Gerald, the manager, looked like he'd been hit with a brick. I didn't know," she didn't say. Agent Williams cut him off. "You called the FBI to arrest a senior federal investigator in the middle of a compliance audit, while she was recording everything. That's obstruction of justice. That's a felony." The room was dead silent again. Maria stood frozen behind the glass. Kevin leaned back against the counter like he needed support. "Mrs. Patterson just shook her head, whispering, "Unbelievable." Dr. Coleman stayed calm. "Agent Williams, everything has been documented. Audio, video, employee behavior, customer reactions. I'll submit the full report to the board and DOJ after we debrief." Gerald didn't even try to argue. There was nothing to say. He was no longer running the bank. He wasn't even in charge of his own future anymore. The fallout came fast. Gerald was still standing there when the call came through, this time from the bank president himself. He didn't even need to put the call on speaker, the man's voice was loud and furious. "Do you have any idea who you just insulted on live camera? Do you even understand what you've done?" Gerald tried to explain, to say he was protecting the bank, that he didn't know who she was. But the voice on the other end cut through him like a blade. "You called the police on a federal investigator in front of 20,000 people. You just created a national disaster." President Chen's voice dropped low, serious, Dr. Coleman could shut down this branch today. She reports directly to the Federal Reserve Board. You're suspended, effective immediately. Asterisk. The phone went silent. Gerald looked like a man who had just lost everything, because he had. Then came the shift. Dr. Coleman turned to the staff behind the counter. Maria Gonzalez, she said clearly. Maria looked up, startled. Yes. You're being promoted to acting branch manager, effective immediately. Gasps filled the lobby. Maria's hands flew to her mouth. Kevin looked like someone had punched the air out of him. Dr. Coleman continued, your first job is to assist federal compliance officers when they arrive. Full access. Full cooperation. She looked around the room one last time, at the customers still holding their phones, at the officers, at Agent Williams, at the stunned staff behind the glass. This audit started because 14 complaints of racial discrimination were filed in under a year. Today, we confirmed them. Every word, every reaction, every denial was recorded. That footage will go to the DOJ and the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency. Mrs. Patterson stepped forward, voice strong. What about the other customers who were treated like this? Dr. Coleman nodded. Their cases will be reopened. If they were wrongfully denied, they'll be contacted, and the bank will be required to make it right, including compensation. Maria wiped a tear and stood taller. The atmosphere had completely changed. Phones were still rolling, but now they weren't capturing chaos. They were capturing change. Dr. Coleman looked to Agent Williams. Submit the footage and full report within the hour. Yes, ma'am. And just like that, the woman who walked in quietly and got humiliated in front of everyone, had just turned the entire bank upside down, and handed it back to the people who had been ignored for too long.